It was just past midnight when I pulled off at exit 243, a lonely stretch off Highway 77 in rural Texas. I'd been driving for close to 9 hours, and my eyelids were starting to feel like sandpaper. The next rest stop wasn't for another 30 miles, so when I saw the small blue sign for a scenic pull-off, I figured it'd have to do. I needed to stretch my legs, maybe splash some water on my face, and keep from dozing off behind the wheel. The exit ramp led to a cracked little turnout with a single picnic table, a trash bin overflowing with old fast food bags, and a vending machine buzzing under one of those old sodium lights. The kind that turns everything a sickly yellow-orange. Past that was just miles of open field and the outline of tall corn in the distance, rustling in the wind. I pulled my rig off to the side, killed the engine, and stepped out. The air was humid and quiet, except for the buzz of the vending machine and the distant croak of frogs or maybe cicadas. As I was stretching, I noticed someone sitting on the bench next to the machine. A man, hunched forward with his hands over his face. At first, I thought he might be sleeping, but then I heard it. Soft, stuttering sobs, just barely audible over the night sounds. I hesitated. I mean, you run into all kinds of folks out here, tweakers, hitchhikers, people running from God knows what. But something about the way he was crying, it felt real. Raw, like grief was clawing out of his throat. "You all right, man?" I asked, cautiously walking a few steps closer. He didn't look up, just kept crying, rocking slightly. I caught a whiff of sweat and old clothes. "Need help or anything?" I asked again. His shoulders jerked slightly, like he'd just realized someone was there. Then he mumbled something I couldn't make out. I stepped a little closer. "What was that?" He lifted his head slightly, just enough for me to see his face under the flickering light. Pale skin, hollow eyes like he hadn't slept in days. Tears had carved lines down his cheeks. His mouth moved again. "They come with the lights," he whispered. I blinked. "Come again." "The lights in the corn," he said louder this time, his voice cracking. "They hum. They float. And they take things." I stood there for a second, unsure if I should feel sorry for the guy or creeped out. "You need me to call someone?" I asked, already starting to back away. He shook his head violently, then buried his face in his hands again. The sobbing picked up like a switch had flipped. I didn't know what else to do. I wasn't going to force him into my truck, and there was no signal out there to call anyone. I figured maybe he just needed space. I walked over to the side of my rig, rinsed my face with some bottled water, and popped a caffeine tablet. I was only gone a couple minutes, maybe 3 tops. When I turned back toward the bench, he was gone. I walked over to the vending machine and looked around. No sign of him. Not in the field, not down the ramp. Nothing. Just that busted bench and a flickering soda machine, buzzing louder now like it was straining to stay alive. I called out once or twice. "Hey, you all right?" Nothing. Eventually I gave up. I figured maybe he wandered into the field to be alone, or got picked up by someone while I had my back turned. Either way, it wasn't my business anymore. I got back in the cab and fired up the engine. The cab lights flicked on, and for a moment I caught my own tired eyes in the mirror. I rubbed my face and turned onto the ramp, heading back toward the highway. That's when I heard it. Soft at first. Just a faint whimper. A breath hitching in the back of someone's throat. Crying. I turned off the radio. It was coming from behind me, inside the trailer. I pulled over almost immediately, heart thudding. I grabbed my flashlight, climbed out, and unlatched the trailer doors. My rig was empty. I was deadheading it back to Fort Worth. No cargo, no one inside. I swung the doors open. Nothing. Just an empty aluminum trailer. The only sound was the creak of the frame and a soft breeze blowing through the fields. I climbed up into the back with my flashlight, scanning every corner. I even crouched down to look beneath the liftgate. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. But the second I stepped back out and shut the doors, the crying started again. I spun around and yanked the doors back open. Silence. Then, just as I climbed back into the cab, I heard it again, louder now. Sobbing. Choked and desperate. But not outside. Inside the cab. I whipped around in my seat, shining the flashlight behind me. Empty. I even threw open the sleeper compartment. Nothing. No sign of anyone. I sat there for maybe a minute, just frozen. Then the crying stopped, as suddenly as it had started. I didn't sleep that night. I drove straight through until I hit Fort Worth and dropped the trailer off. Didn't even tell the dispatcher about what happened. Didn't see the point. Who'd believe me? I tried to write it off as exhaustion. Highway hypnosis. Maybe I hallucinated the whole thing. But a week later, I passed through that same stretch again, just during the day this time. Out of curiosity, I pulled off at exit 243. Wanted to see the place in daylight. But it wasn't there. The turnout was gone. Paved over. Nothing but grass and barbed wire where the rest stop had been. I thought maybe I got the exit number wrong. But I checked my logs. My GPS. Even pulled up satellite maps from a few years back. There's no record of a rest area at exit 243. Not now. Not ever. But I remember the crying. I remember the man's face. And sometimes, when I've been on the road too long and the cab's gone quiet, I still hear it. Coming from the back. That broken, hopeless sobbing. Just like before. Story 2. I've been driving trucks for almost 13 years now. You learn to deal with weird schedules, weird places, and even weirder people. But this was the first time I ever seriously considered leaving the rig on the side of the road and walking away. This happened last October. I was doing a long haul from Redding, California to somewhere just past Portland, Oregon, lumber and building supplies. The kind of load you don't even think twice about. I had everything strapped, inspected, and triple-checked before I hit the road. I'm OCD about my logs too. Every detail's gotta match. That matters more than most people think in this business. Anyway, I remember pulling off around 3:30 a.m. at this little rest stop off the 97. I was hitting my legal limit for drive time, and I'd been running hard through some rain and fog. The spot was nearly empty, just one other semi with the cab lights off, and an old pickup parked sideways near the bathroom building. I backed in, filled out the rest of my logbook, and knocked out in the sleeper berth. When I woke up, it was just after 7. Sun was barely up, that thick Oregon mist still hugging the trees. I did the usual, grabbed a coffee from the vending machine, stretched a bit, then walked around to do a once-over on the rig before heading back out. That's when I saw it. There was a crate, a big, grimy wooden crate, shoved into the very back of my trailer, right next to the door. It looked old, beat to hell, like it had been moved 100 times and dropped more than once. Thing had no labels, no plastic wrap, no numbers. Just some faint black stencil work on one side that had mostly faded. The only letters I could still make out were SUB and human. No joke. At first, I thought maybe I just missed it during loading. But that didn't sit right with me. My trailer had been packed solid and ready. I remember that distinctly because I'd helped the warehouse guy rearrange a few pallets to make room for one more. We filled every inch. There was no way this crate had been in there when I shut the doors. I called my dispatcher, Paul, and asked him if there had been any changes or special drop-offs added while I was sleeping. He checked the system and said no. Just the original load, nothing else. I asked if anyone else could have accessed my trailer. He kind of laughed and said, not unless someone had a key and a forklift in the middle of the woods. He told me to just keep driving and get the load dropped. Said if it was some warehouse screw-up, they'd deal with it later. I almost listened. I drove another hour, but the crate started bothering me more and more. I kept looking in the mirrors, expecting, I don't know, something. The idea of hauling mystery freight freaked me out. Finally, I pulled into one of those chain-up areas near the summit. Just a gravel turnout with a view of absolutely nothing but trees and fog. I opened the trailer again and took a closer look. That's when I saw the scratch marks. On the inside walls of the crate. Long gouges in the wood, like someone had taken a metal object, maybe a crowbar or even fingernails, and clawed at the inside panels until their hands gave out. There were no holes, no signs of a lock, just one side nailed shut with an old, rusted panel. And it smelled, not rotten, exactly, but stale, like old water and mildew, and something chemical underneath. I should have called someone right then. The cops, the DOT, anyone. But instead, I told myself it was just some screwed-up antique delivery or forgotten military surplus. I closed the doors and kept driving. The pounding started a couple hours later. I was about 30 miles from Salem, pushing downhill through some winding turns, when I heard it, a single, dull thud from behind me. At first I thought something had shifted in the trailer, maybe a loose strap. But then came another, louder, and then another, then 3 in rapid succession, like something inside the crate had come to life and was slamming into the walls. I pulled over so fast I nearly jackknifed it. Got out, ran to the back, and flung the doors open. The crate was there, untouched. No cracks, no damage, no new marks. Just sitting there like it had been the whole time. But this time it was open. The front panel was pried away and lying flat on the floor of the trailer, splinters pointing outward like it had exploded from the inside. The inside of the crate was pitch black, but empty. Completely. I even climbed halfway in with my flashlight. Nothing. No compartments. No holes. Just an old crate that had clearly held something, and now didn't. I slammed the trailer doors shut and locked them, hard in my throat. I called Paul again, trying to explain what had happened, but I must have sounded like a lunatic. He kept asking me if I'd hit my head or if I'd been using any supplements. He even asked if I was tired enough to be hallucinating. I kept driving. I made it to the yard outside Portland around 6 p.m. The sun was starting to go down, and all I wanted was to dump the load and get some answers. I told the guy on site, a younger dude named Jay, that I needed help unloading and that there was an extra crate someone needs to take a look at. He gave me a weird look, but went with it. We opened the trailer together. The crate was gone. Not moved, not hidden, just gone. Even the broken plank I'd seen before was missing. The rest of the load was untouched. Jay started laughing like I was pulling a prank. He actually asked if I'd been filming some TikTok horror thing. When I finally got back to my cab and shut the door, I sat there for 10 minutes staring at nothing. Later that night, in my hotel, I kept thinking about those scratch marks. I remembered something weird. They hadn't looked like they were made in a panic. They were uniform, like someone had been doing it for hours. Days, maybe. Calmly, like it was a routine. I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the pounding in my head. Not fast or frantic. Just steady, like something knocking to be let out. Measured. Patient. The next morning, I called Paul again and asked if he could pull up the security feed from the rest stop. I wanted to prove I wasn't losing my mind. But he said they couldn't access any external feeds. It wasn't one of their partner stops. He did tell me something else, though. He said the semi that had been parked next to me when I pulled in, the one with its lights off, it belonged to a driver named Alan Kraus. Independent contractor. They found his rig 2 days later, abandoned 30 miles north. Engine cold, doors locked, trailer empty. Alan hasn't been seen since. Story 3. I've been an overnight long-haul driver for the better part of 20 years. I've seen just about everything you can see out there on the road. Overturned rigs, jackknifed semis, drunk drivers, even a full-blown dust storm that made the sky look like it was bleeding. But nothing, and I mean nothing, ever made me feel the way I did that night on Route 50 in Nevada. Locals call it the loneliest road in America. After what I saw, I don't think they're saying that just to be poetic. It was early September, just after Labor Day, and I was hauling refrigeration units from Salt Lake City to Sacramento. I prefer night driving. Less traffic, cooler air, and I like the solitude. That stretch of highway east of Fallon is especially barren. No towns, no real exits, no lights for miles. Just you, your high beams, and the occasional set of glowing eyes in the dark. It was around 3 a.m. when I first noticed the headlights. I hadn't seen another car for almost an hour. They showed up in my mirrors, 2 sharp, white dots way in the distance behind me. I figured it was another trucker or maybe someone trying to make up time on the night run. At first, it seemed like they were gaining on me fast. Too fast. I remember checking my speed. I was doing 65, maybe 67, and they were closing the gap like I was standing still. Something about the way the lights moved didn't sit right. No gradual approach, no sway or bounce you'd expect from a vehicle on a rough road. Just straight-line movement, dead smooth, like it was on rails. Then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, the lights swerved off the road. I mean hard, like a deliberate turn, sharp and clean. I watched them veer down to the right and vanish. At first, I thought maybe they were pulling off to a turnout or one of those gravel access paths utility trucks sometimes use. But as I drove past where I thought they'd turned, there was nothing. No turnout, no driveway, no rest stop. Just a short slope that dipped down into a wide gravel pit on the side of the road. One of those old roadside borrow pits from when they were building the highway. I pulled over. Curiosity, mostly, but something else too. That feeling you get when something doesn't add up. I got out and walked to the edge of the pit. The moon was high and bright enough that I didn't need a flashlight. The gravel spread out maybe 200 feet wide, sloping gently down into a shallow basin, surrounded by scrub and rock. Completely silent. Not a single sound except the ticking of my engine cooling down. That's when I saw the tire tracks. They were fresh, clean imprints in the gravel, 2 lines leading from the road down into the pit. But here's the part that made my stomach turn. The tracks just stopped. About 30 feet in. No turn, no loop, no sign of braking. Just a straight line that ended halfway into the gravel. I stood there staring for a long time. I even walked the length of the tracks, hoping maybe I'd see some kind of trick of the light or find a hidden road at the bottom. But no, it was just gravel. Solid, undisturbed gravel. No oil stains, no debris, no car. It didn't make sense. If someone had turned off the road, there had to be a car, or at least something. But there was nothing there. Eventually, I climbed back into my cab and drove on. The rest of the night passed without incident, but that pit stuck in my mind like a sliver. I couldn't shake it. By the time I hit Reno later that morning, I'd convinced myself it had to be a trick of the light, maybe even a dream. Long hours and caffeine can do strange things to your brain. I stopped for breakfast at a diner just off the interstate. One of those places with laminated menus and sun-faded photos of pancakes on the walls. The TV above the counter was playing the local morning news, volume low, subtitles on. I wasn't really paying attention until I caught something that made me freeze mid-bite. There was a photo of a young man and woman on the screen, both smiling, taken in what looked like the late 90s. The headline below said something about a cold case spotlight. Missing couple, 2009. I turned the volume up. The anchor was talking about how authorities were renewing efforts to solve the case of a couple who vanished during a cross-country road trip 14 years ago. Their last known location? A payphone call near Middlegate, Nevada, the same stretch of Route 50 I had driven just hours before. The last signal from their cell phone pinged a tower near a mile marker not far from where I'd seen those headlights. That pit. The news showed grainy footage of search crews from back then. Helicopters, dogs, state troopers combing the desert. They never found the car. No wreckage, no tracks, no bodies. Just gone. I couldn't help myself. I called the number on the screen, a tip line for the cold case unit. I told them what I saw. The woman on the line sounded polite but skeptical, like she'd fielded too many calls from cranks over the years. She took my info, thanked me, said someone might follow up. No one ever did. A couple weeks later, I drove that route again. Couldn't help it. I told myself I'd stop at the pit and see it again in daylight. Maybe it would look different. Maybe there'd be some obvious explanation in the sunlight that I'd missed in the dark. But when I got there, it wasn't there. I recognized the general area, the curve in the road, the shape of the distant hills, but the gravel pit was gone. Just flat land with some scattered brush. Not even a dip in the earth where it should have been. Like it had never existed. I pulled over and walked around, confused and increasingly unsettled. The only thing I found was a small piece of broken plastic, black, sun-faded, maybe part of a taillight, half buried in the dirt. I pocketed it without thinking and got back on the road. I still have that piece of plastic in my glove box. Every once in a while, I take it out and just stare at it, trying to remember every detail of that night. Every time I drive through Nevada now, I keep my eyes glued to the mirrors once it hits 3 a.m. I haven't seen those headlights since, but I get the feeling that stretch of road doesn't like to be noticed too often, like it shows itself only when it wants to. And if you follow it down, you might not come back.